I'm gonna start with the hat. Now, those of you who have been here before and those of you who have known me for years, even before I was on YouTube, you probably know that I love hats, and the cooler slash weirder slash crazier the hat, the better. I really enjoy playing with the hairpiece styles from this specific region. I'm going to show you where this region is. I'll have Editing Daisy put a map up here somewhere, and that will show you where the Swabian region is, just in case you're not sure. Now, this style of clothing and headpieces is found in sort of a variety of circles of the Holy Roman Empire, but mostly situated around this southeastern region of the Holy Roman Empire. So I hear this commonly referred to as Swabian dress. Even though we do see it outside of Swabia proper, it's kind of centralized there, if you will. My favorite inspiration for this project is going to revolve around the Babenberg family triptych. This is a triptych which depicts many members of the Babenberg family. The Babenberg family ruled the Margraviate of Austria, so actually we're not even technically in Swabia, we're in Austria here, but like I said, people refer to it as Swabian just as a centralized location, but it's really seen in all these different areas surrounding Swabia. The Babenberg family triptych was painted between 1489 and 1492. So we're really late in the 1400s, aka the 15th century. The headpieces from this era and region are quite varied, but they all have sort of a central running theme. And one that I hadn't done yet that I wanted to do was just a different variation of a sparkly kind of sequined headpiece. So I've done some sequined headpieces from the Germanic region already, but there's like so many more that I can do, and there's so many more to play with, so gotta do another one. I'll explain to you more about how I did that when I go through the process, but basically I was inspired by all of these headpieces, and as I like to do, I rarely just copy one specific headpiece. Most frequently, I will take inspiration from various images and kind of put it together into something that I think I want to wear and I want to make, because that's who it's for, hey. I absolutely love what is referred to as a Flinderhaube, or a really sparkly sequined hat that is found in the Germanic region. Flinderhaube are found throughout the 15th century. We see Flinderhaube in the 16th century and even on into the 17th. There are many examples in paintings of all different types of these hats with sequins on them. So really, I think there are lots of different ways that you can interpret this, and I have interpreted Flinderhaube differently before, and it's time for a new one. So I'll explain to you some of the choices I'm making and how I'm putting together this Flinderhaube as I go through the making of process. First, I decided to work on the gefrins, which is a fringe found at the back of this hat. I have made a gefrins before out of yarn, and if you haven't seen that video, I'll link it below for you. This particular gefrins is a little unique because it's very spangly and sparkly. This is a much more rare type of gefrins found in artwork and perfectly appropriate for this super blingy hat. I'm using a piece of gold trim that kind of gives that effect of what we see in the portraits as the band for the gefrins. And then I am using my little pliers here to attach all of these sequins in little rows. Now these sequins are very thin, so the jump rings want to come off of them. What I'm doing to combat that is I'm overlapping the edges of the jump rings plenty. So I kind of tested it to make sure that they weren't falling apart, and when I got the tightness that worked, I went on using that. The process itself is pretty repetitive. It's just attaching lots and lots of sequins together, and eventually at the bottom I have sequins that only have a hole on the top, whereas most of them have a hole on both sides. So that sequin with a hole just on one side is at the bottom. I made enough of these that I thought it looked right when attached to the band, and because I'm using this trim that already has little loops on it, that makes it very, very easy to attach them in an even sort of manner to the trim. And that again is just with a little jump ring. And then to attach the Gefrons to my head, I've folded over the trim on the end, attaching it to a little O-ring, and then I can thread a piece of ribbon through the O-rings to tie it onto my head. Next up, I'm making an undercap. This is going to be the trim, and the undercap itself is white linen. This is a shape that I've experimented with in the past, and so that's why I kind of have an idea what shape I want it to be. It's a really simple cap to make. I'm simply folding over the edges here. So I've serged the edges. You can also just double fold all of them or whatever you like. So the front edge has a ribbon attached to each side. That's going to be able to tie in the back of my head. And then for the large curved edge, I'm sending a ribbon through there using a safety pin, and that ribbon is going to be used to gather the cap. I have made caps just like this before using the same pattern, just different designs and fabrics, so I was pretty confident that this would work. Next up, I am doing the outer cap with the sequins. I had this lovely silk that has the little squares or diamond pattern, and I thought that would be really perfect for helping me with a guide for the sequins. This time I made the cap wider on the sides because I want it to give that poofing out on the sides effect that we see in so many of the Flinderhaube portraits from the 15th century. Attaching the sequins was really just a long time of hand sewing. I attached first, and then I'm attaching the Gefrons, and then finally the sparkly Flinderhaube. I am absolutely in love with how this looks. It's so sparkly, and I am ready to make a dress to go with it, because when you got a hat like this, you gotta have a matching dress. So next up, I need a dress to go with this amazing new hat. I opted for a kind of somewhat generic interpretation of this dress style. Now, because of the print of my fabric, I knew that I wanted the design to be all around the bottom hem of the skirt. So to accomplish that, I needed to cut it flat, or at least I needed to be able to apply it on. So the easiest thing for me is to cut a rectangular skirt. So in these images, there appear to be multiple cuts of the dresses. I did another version of a Swabian dress in a video before, in which I cut it in a very simple kind of 4-panel dress design style. Some of these dresses have gathers in them. Some, I believe, may be gathered just in the center front and the center back, similar to what we call the housebook dress, due to the fact that it was commonly represented by the master of the housebook. Some of these dresses, we might argue, may have pleats all the way around, and this is a very ubiquitous thing from this time period to start pleating skirts onto bodices. So I think it's quite plausible, and even if it wasn't plausible, it works best for my fabric, and I'm the designer here, so we're gonna go with it. So that means the design of my dress is going to be pretty basic, and it's really represented in all of these images. It's going to be a fitted bodice that's cut quite open in the front, a pleated on rectangular skirt, and then sleeves that are about 3/4 length, and they're open along the back of the arm, and there they are laced closed. First step of making the dress, cut out the pieces. Now, I already had a pattern which I created for my other Swabian gown. Here I'm doing a different patterning method than I did for that one. So what I'm using here is actually my Renaissance kirtle pattern. This is a generic Renaissance kirtle that you can pretty much use for most of the European Renaissance regions. I love it because it's so versatile. In this case, I'm creating the front that I want, so I'm cutting straight down from the shoulder to the waist there. And I do have the tutorial for how to draft this pattern in my shop. So if you're interested in having a versatile Renaissance kirtle pattern, this is my go-to. I use it for pretty much every Renaissance bodice that I make, in some iteration, variation, or fashion. I am interlining this bodice using a cotton canvas, and that's to give this fabric more stability because it's rather a delicate fabric, and I want to make sure that it has plenty of strength. Here I am pressing all of my seams open, and I'm making channels where I'm going to put boning across the front that will help the opening to hold its shape. To line the bodice, I'm attaching the lining to the outer fabric. I'm pinning this all the way around the opening edges. And then I am using a strip of gold silk to bind that. Now you can absolutely use bias binding, but what we see in this period is we see binding that's actually cut on the straight grain. The good thing about that is that it's less wasteful of your fabric. You can just simply cut a little strip as wide as you want. I used about 2 inches. And then I'm folding it over and applying it just as I would bias binding. The only difference is that it's a straight binding. And I will stitch this down by hand, but you can use the machine too, whichever suits your fancy. Also, don't forget the boning that goes into those little boning channels. also added O-rings to the front of the dress so I can add a lacing there too. For the lacing, I'm using a satin gold ribbon, and I'm attaching these very fancy aglets to the end of it because these fancy aglets are perfect for a fancy dress. To finish off the look, I am adding a belt, which I created using velvet and interfacing and some castings that I believe I got from Armor and Castings over in Ukraine. I've had these cast pieces for this belt for many years, so I'm not 100% certain, but that's where I usually buy my cast belt pieces. Overall, this dress style is really comfy and it's really fun. The one thing is that it was very, very hot. We're kind of going through a heat wave here in Texas, and so it was a little warm for when I took the pictures, but I do think it's going to be absolutely perfect for events once the temperature cools down. I love how blingy it is and how it's plausibly medieval or late medieval, but it's still the fairy princess dress of my dreams. And my favorite type of historic dress is just that. It's something that has that medieval princess feel of like all the fairy tale and fantasy movies I used to watch when I was a kid, frankly. Really hope you've enjoyed this project. I thought it was super fun and I love wearing this dress. I actually stopped at Taco Bell on the way home from my photo shoot and all the employees in Taco Bell loved the dress. It's always so fun to wear things into a store or something where I wouldn't normally wear it because so many people appreciate these types of things and sometimes they don't get to see them unless you happen to wander in and share it with them. I hope you've enjoyed being on this journey with me. If you take some inspiration, I would love to see what you do. Whether you are sewing, drawing, painting, making whatever it is you do, I would always love to see what you create. I am quite a fan of art and creativity, and if you do want to share what you make, you can find me on all the social medias as Daisy Viktoria. My website is daisyviktoria.com, and a special thank you to my patrons over on Patreon who help me so much to continue creating content. I hope you all have an absolutely magical day, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.